All right, I asked Dr. Casey Howard to join us on Hill Law Firm's YouTube channel to discuss a few things. She's a treating clinical psychologist here in San Antonio, Texas. She deals with trauma, PTSD, things such as eating disorders, sexual assault. She also, for a small percentage of her work, on occasion, gets involved in the medico-legal aspects of lawsuits. Specifically, sometimes she's hired as an expert witness by law firms to evaluate clients or claims. We worked with her many years ago on a case, and we haven't since. But Casey, let's just talk a little bit. What is an expert witness? What does that mean?
Basically, when an attorney needs a psychologist to come in and take an independent look at a case and say, okay, is there anything mental health related going on at this point? Then that's where a psychologist as an expert witness would come in and say, okay, I'm going to look and see, is someone experiencing depression, anxiety, PTSD, or how has whatever event is the subject of the legal matter going on impacted their mental status? And
I think that's a good point to make. I recently had a client reach out to me and they told me they thought they were suffering from depression and needed medication. And all I can tell them is tell your doctor. But you, if somebody refers one of their clients to you, you're actually able to, is it testing or interviews? What process do you go through with these clients of law firms to determine whether or not they have an injury or don't have an injury or what they're dealing with? What's your process?
We do a very extensive and thorough clinical interview that usually takes several hours to really get a history of background information. So is this something, I've been depressed since I was 8 years old. Okay, that's going to be a different kind of case, right? A different situation than somebody who really wasn't having any issues and now they are. So we do a very thorough clinical interview looking at all the biopsychosocial factors, and then we do a very thorough battery of psychological tests to look at what else is going on here. And we have basically every clinical disorder out there, there's a test for, so you can look and kind of get a very objective picture of what's going on symptomatically.
Are there occasions in which you meet with somebody's client and the lawyer's expecting you to say one thing or expecting you to find a certain diagnosis, and you have to tell them, hey, this just isn't there. They do not have the indicia of these disorders that you think?
Absolutely. So the same way I would never present a legal case to an attorney and say, look, this person, needs damages or whatever it is. I'm not an attorney. And so the same way as a psychologist, I feel like it is my job to come in with an honest opinion and say, look, they're really having problems or they're really not having problems. They're actually adaptively dealing really well with this.
Or dealing with some other problem.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or it was some long-standing issue.
We, one thing we have to do as attorneys is we have to try to figure out the best way to present our client's story to a jury in a way that is honest and something we can do with a straight face, and also something that is going to be credible enough a judge says you're allowed to tell the jury about this. And one of my first jobs, I remember my boss telling me that when it comes to specifically men who've lost either children or their spouse, that we had to hire a psychologist. And his take was that he has a very hard time getting men to talk about what they're dealing with psychologically after they've lost a loved one. Have you found it that men have a harder time telling you what they're dealing with, but the testing gives you a different story?
Absolutely. And I will say exactly on that note that when I explain to client, the individual, the client coming in, what is my job? I say I really want to present your picture, your voice as a human to the jury, because medical records, x-rays, they don't show who you are as a human. And so it's really my job to be able to be a voice for you, good or bad, however that looks, for the jury. And so a lot of that really does come from psychological testing, and a lot of it comes from the interview. In cases, I do a lot of work with traumatic grief. One of my favorite things is sitting with family members and hearing them talk. Favorite sounds odd, but hearing them talk about the impact of the person that they lost, right? Because you get such a beautiful picture of who the person was and then what that was to them. Whereas they may not have the ability to straight out say to you, well, this person the death of this person left me feeling X, Y, and Z. As you talk to them about the impact of the loss, all of that begins to unfold and present itself.
And I assume that you've had an occasion, and I know I dealt with that specifically with you, where you get to tell the attorney that's involved you in a case, here's what your client's dealing with, and you're probably illustrating to them or illuminating something to them that they never even knew was underlying their client's backstory, right?
Absolutely. And that really is the job of the psychologist in a case. I think that's the great advantage that we have, is we get to present the very human side of the client for the attorney, the jury, and the judge.
Right. What percentage would you say of your work is expert work?
Less than 5%.
Okay. Thanks for joining us. I just wanted to give a little bit of insight into how you work as an expert. We sometimes have our clients see psychologists, and I think it's important because some of them ask, well, why do I need to go see a psychologist, or why do I need an expert? And sometimes that's because a layperson cannot diagnose themselves. And sometimes it's because they are dealing with things that they can't put into words. And psychologists, that's y'all's job. Y'all diagnose and y'all explain what somebody's dealing with, right?
Absolutely. Very important.
Well, thanks for joining us here. We've had you on our podcast, and we'll have you on here again, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.